Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Friday. Going live again, talking AI with Nico Lafakis. How you doing, man?
Doing well, sir. How about yourself?
I am doing great. You were just sharing. I think we should just dive in. It's the fun part for the people who like figuring things out, understanding how it works, troubleshooting, all that stuff.
Hmm.
Is that, man, the quality from one answer to the next, from one AI tool to the next. It's like we we've got a little bit of time left, like to feel
Yeah,
valued as humans. Like the
yeah,
AI's got a ways to go in some spots, and yeah, man, you're telling me you're doing some stuff, just ideating and across all these tools. I'd love for you to show us.
yeah. And what's very cool is one of them in particular allows us to take a look at things through three different lenses too. So it's not just one model, like you'll see. It's sort of three models in one interface. So what I was telling Chris is that this morning, we were thinking about like format for the show last week and like how we should work on things. And so this morning I'm like, okay, well, where do we get started with the stuff? And in thinking about it, I was like, okay, ideation, that's what I'm stuck on. So let me just ask the model. So I just created a scenario with the model where it's like, okay, look, I am a co-host on a show and we're working on this project using large language models with HubSpot and how to incorporate the two in order to make your life easier. And essentially, like, do you think you can help me to create where we should start working on things week to week that enhances what we're working on from the start until creating a stunning final product based on the work that we do together. And so what I found super interesting was the responses essentially that I was getting. And what I mentioned to Chris was the fact that initially I'd started with Claude, and then immediately I thought, okay, well, what happens if I ask all the other models and see what their outputs look like? So with the initial Claude output, let me get rid of some of this stuff. Again, it was the same question. Always be nice to your model. And, the output was really, very short. Not that I tell Claude to be concise or short in any way. It just kind of just got right to the point. And it was pretty good. It was what I was thinking of, because in my head, I was like, okay, in this week, we need to establish the project. We need to pick the company that we want to, work with. We need to pick the fictitious scenario we're going to be doing, and then sort of like outline what it is that we're trying to do with this whole thing. Right. So that's what I was looking for in a week one. And then, I was thinking in week two, all right, now we get started working with the company. So, okay, it kind of gets into that, but it does a little bit more of the research in week one than it does in two. So then I went over to GPT and I started with 4.0. And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like with 4.0? And what I found super interesting was it starts out with an introduction to the project, overview of the company, but then it goes into training the AI model to understand different key points and then segment the contact list. So like here, it automatically goes into where Claude was like, oh yeah, we're going to set up some stuff and we're going to, take a look at some stuff from a fictitious angle. GPT is really more about like, okay, overview of the company's current CRM setup. It's like, it's looking at things that we don't necessarily have. It's kind of looking at it as we're already working with a client and like, this is how we're going to be doing things. The remainder of things were interesting, right? And it aligned to what you would normally want to do, but it didn't really have any of the, preemptive stuff, right? So then I thought, okay, well, one of the questions I get asked the most is what's the difference between regular GPT and using Hub Helper Harry? So asked the same question to Hub Helper Harry, and the output was exactly what I had expected. I'm not trying to toot my own horn at all. It's what I expected. So it's a HubSpot based project. Here's what the objectives are for week one, introducing the project, explaining the goal, where AI is going to play a role in everything, and then what HubSpot related tasks, right? So overall everything, and then a nice setup of the initial CRM structures in HubSpot, setting up whatever custom properties and things that we would need for this fictitious company that we're going to be working with. And then, data gathering and enrichment. So we talk about firmographic data, demonstrate how to use the large language model. And it's where it comes to the analysis and categorization, it's, what I would incorporate in that is essentially coming up with the fictitious data to go along with it. But yeah, still, it's definitely closer in the ballpark. And then there is another model that's out there that is really very, very interesting, because most every model is tied down and it has limitations and parameters and what it's willing to accept. There is a service out there called Venice, and Venice hosts models that don't do that and don't really care about limitations, and
Limitations
are willing to go. Limitations like, let's say, foul language based conversations, like political charged conversations. Yeah, like all the stuff that it acts like a public library. Let's put it that way. I think it's the best version of an online public library. So you can find bad stuff in there. You go to a library, you can find as much good stuff as you can bad stuff, right? So more good than bad, but still. Anyhow, so same question to Venice. Got something along the same lines of what we got from the initial 4.0 GPT 4.0 output, except that it didn't assume that we had something in mind already. So it was really more about like just talking about benefits and that. And then in the second, what I found about Venice that was interesting is that it was one of the only ones that was like, oh yeah, use the AI model to do the research. Right. All the other models were just like, yeah, well, we'll discuss it, and then we'll discuss methods of gathering firmographic data, right? How to enrich it, which again, this could be that step in which we would use the large language model to do the research, maybe. Even back here, you don't really see anything about using the large language model to gather data. You also don't necessarily see it. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Use an AI to conduct initial research on the company. So in Claude and Venice's case, like independent models, essentially, not that OpenAI isn't, but it's different, let's say. At least those two are willing to admit that, like, yeah, you will have to do some online research about this before you actually get started.
Yeah. It reminds me of all the times where it's like, I'm asking it to do something and then it tells me how I need to do it. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, that's what I know you can do this. Like, it's taught me a lot about communication, honestly, because, I've always had a weakness, like in emails, like to just, have way more than one objective, to the email, and humans have a hard time like understanding what needs to be done when you do that. And that what you showed with, Chat GPT, sometimes you can go back and it was like, okay, well, it took that word way too literally. And then built the whole response off of that.
Yeah. That's where it starts getting like annoying, because of the fact that you're trying to get out of the repetitive use.
Right. And it's like, no, I said like real world, not actual real. Like, yeah.
What's interesting about Venice is that, like, so this output is from the latest model that they've released, which is Hermes 3, which actually tests slightly above Llama. I don't want to say it's like magnanimously better, but it's slightly better than Llama 3. But the cool part is, to your point, you can actually modify what the temperature, which is essentially the randomness of the response, and then you can also adjust the top P value, which is essentially how well your temperature essentially says, like, do you want it to be closer to what your prompt is, or do you want it to be more like random, basically? And the top P will basically tell you, hey, if you have a lower value of top P, is where you get a lot of the repetition. You get like a lot of it saying the same thing over and over, trying to explain the same thing over and over.
Game changing.
Yeah. Whereas like higher output or higher value for that output gives you like a more, I don't want to say creative, but essentially more creative. It tries to give you a better answer. So Novus Hermes is Venice's latest model. Their Theta 8B is the fastest version of the Novus line. And then if you wanted to, you can also use Llama 3. So again, this was from the Novus output. And then I also did a version from the Llama 3 output, and it was very, very different from everybody else's. Llama basically said, here's what we're going to do in order to start working on your project. And then, once we actually figure out this business, it wanted to do a lot of business research ahead of time before it even got into like what we were going to be doing week to week. But even when it came to that, it's definitely not as like planned out, plotted out as all of the rest of them. It was just very, very straightforward. Here's what you're going to do. Here's when you need to do it. Carry on. So in terms of like this, at least I hope this somewhat answers people's questions when it comes to why would you use a different model, right? And so here's a really interesting thing from Venice too, is that the Llama model took 10 seconds to come up with this answer. It took the Nova model 1 second to come up with the same answer. Not that, when we're talking about seconds, it's not like that kind of time is seriously important. We're already saving hours of time here. But just a thing to point out that this model took a little bit longer to come up with the answer, and the answer that it came up with was slightly inferior by comparison. So perhaps this model has a better use, right? Considering that it gave like a more generic, straightforward output, it's possible that it's a better model for asking straightforward, generic questions. The NOAA's model definitely gave a more when it came to the Llama model, it was the same temperature settings and top heat settings. So I didn't change anything except for the type of model that was being used. The NOAA's model gave us a little bit more detail, right? And then Claude kind of did the same thing as Llama, but again, with a little bit more detail and structured into the weeks that it needed to happen in. I think Triple H did a really great job, and again, structured everything into the weeks that it should happen. And then 4.0 was the only one that like missed the mark, basically, but it still did some structuring. So, which tool to use to do the job properly. It's why you should use the different models so that you can assess which output you like the best. Oh, I forgot about Gemini.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah. So Gemini gave a really creative response, and it was actually really decent output. So I can at least say that the newer model of Gemini is working better than the old one. I can't say that its incorporation in hardware makes it better, but you can see that it's gone like above and beyond what most of the other models did. It assumed that I needed the entire things, from start to finish. So not only did it, respond, but then it also gives us like a project title that we could be using, gives us a suggestion for the type of business that we should be using as the model, gives the overall goal, and then, starts to plan out the weeks. Again, it actually does what I'm looking to do, which is to use the LLM to do an analysis on the company and pull all that data together. But what I like is that it differentiated between what it is that the AI should do and what it is that the human should be doing.
Yeah.
I thought this was the most unique response of all the models for this reason, right?
Sometimes that's like the prescriptive, like the level of prescription that you hope for.
Yeah.
Or it's like kind of like it would be nice, like, but it's like not even not at that expectation level yet.
Right.
Think about these things that would be cool, and then when they surprise you, that's a lot of the fun part. And I was just thinking, like, I didn't touch Gemini until it was available on my Google Pixel, right? And it's interesting. I'm curious your thoughts, like, because like ChatGPT is something brand new. Like when it came out, like no infrastructure out there. Like, so if you want to use it, you got to go to this place. They've got to build out their partner ecosystem, developer ecosystem. But so they got a head start, but now can Google like catch up just because they're making it insanely accessible? Like I just saw a Chrome update today. Now I can talk to Gemini through the URL bar, through the search bar. It's like that's gonna, man, like
I mean,
maximize the level of intake and
most people
learning.
didn't even realize that you actually have rewrite in any Chrome window that you're in just by right clicking. There's a new help me write feature. It's like so tucked away and hidden, but you can just click that and it opens into a generative text field that you can then just preemptively prompt and say, like, you know, in the style of, I don't know.
So there's another field somewhere open, I'm guessing.
Right. So I could say in the style of Edgar Allan Poe, as if I needed to change the prompt to sound in that style. But let's see. Oh, you know what? I forgot. Okay. Yeah, so I forget what the actual
yeah, we're just
prompting is to make it change, but
yeah.
Actually, and I posted it in Slack in New Breed Slack like weeks ago, but
yeah,
I haven't used Gemini.
Right.
I just don't use it.
Well, that's the thing. Like that's something I'm pretty sure I've turned that setting on. Either way, I've managed that setting as a Chrome user. Like I didn't really know what it meant though. I didn't look into it, so I never used it. But now that like you mentioned that, like, and I do use things like Grammarly and like they have, you know, their AI piece, but that's for like just the point of the interesting like AI arms race as the people with established infrastructure like Microsoft and Google like just infuse it into everything that everybody already has.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to watch this play out.
Yeah, it's quite interesting this past week, especially with so like a lot of the major discussion now is about whether or not it's profitable, and what profit is being gained from it. And so there's been some really, really interesting numbers over the last week where, you know, reports just updated yesterday or day before that unemployment numbers are a lot higher than what they had expected. But GDP is at nearly the same level, if not slightly higher. So there's this question mark of like, okay, well, why? And the answer, of course, is being hidden but not talked about, where it's like, well, yeah, of course, it's very easy to replace people with, you know, automation that does the same, if not, you know, higher amount of output than you were doing before, so that you're selling more product, you're making more money, you know, and then you're ended up that rolls down to paying your employees more, they spend more, everything works out basically.
Yeah.
It all starts to work out.
Well, especially when the entire culture and economy of the country is focused on productivity at all costs, right?
Right.
Like, so, yeah, lots of interesting conversations we had there. It's not like anybody had been warning us of this maybe, you know, 4 years ago or so.
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting aspect is to understand, I think one of the latest reports that came out was showing that enterprise adoption is over 400%. Right. So I think since 2022. So it's, you know, not only is it something that's obviously mainstream, but it clearly, you know, it's a new revolution. So it is absolutely here to stay. And it's definitely something that you need to get into if you haven't already.
Yeah. And I think like, I just remember the moment, I think it was last year, you know, sometime, because I was in like, we were just about to start the agency. I was just in like full learning mode. I think I was working with George on some kind of project, figuring out what content creation looks like. And, you know, and I went to this, or I watched this AI summit online and, you know, it's for this learning platform. And when he said like, they're going from like 200 marketing employees down to 4, like, it was just like, cause like, and that makes sense because everything that he's talking about in that AI summit, he's figured it out and is applying to his business. And when content marketing and just getting stuff out there and being visible is what those 200 people are doing, right? That's going to have a
Yeah.
huge impact. And that was
Yeah.
like the numbers of just going from 200 to 4. It's like that's a
It's significant.
small scale of what, other companies. That's where, like, no matter what you've heard about some of these layoffs, like, no matter how big they are, no matter when they happen, it's like, okay, like, AI is probably impacting those situations, even if they're just like either earlier than planned or more than planned. We're
Mm,
not going to hear that from any of those companies, but
right.
it's having an impact for sure.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I know that you'd asked about it and it definitely piqued my mind. And then I read a post online that kind of, made me think a little, where things are going to go. Because of course, we hear about the fact that yes, it's also going to create jobs too, and people kind of wonder, well, what are the jobs that it's going to create? What what I looked at and what I realized was that it's going to create the job that you've always wanted, essentially. Because when I think about it, I used to actually run a catering business, and the worst part about running that business was having to deal with all of the inventory management and all of the keeping up with dates and keeping up with scheduling, keeping up with what we were going to be doing next and events and inbound. If we had then what we have now, I wouldn't be doing what I do now. I would be wildly successful, right?
Right.
Not that it was, not successful because of that. There was, staffing issues realistically.
Yeah. Right.
So, and at any rate, what is interesting to me is that I saw this post online from someone who was saying, well, surely, because I respond to posts on Facebook often that ask people to join coding academies or code this or code that. And my response is always the same, which is from uh, not only Satya Nadella has said it, but also, CEO from NVIDIA, Jensen. And the quote was, don't let your kids, like, don't have your kids go to school to learn how to code. Like, it's kind of a waste of time,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
And so somebody was like, well, are you saying that getting a CS degree is going to be worthless at this point? And I was like, yeah, basically. But it's, if you're already in college and you're already in the degree and you're learning this stuff, go ahead, keep doing it because you're already paying for it. So you might as well get it, right? If you're not, though, it's really unfortunate, but this is kind of how it goes in video games. This is called nerfing. It's when something new comes. It's when there's a new patch, right? There's a new version of the game, and in every new patch, if you play, especially multiplayer online games, you come to realize after a couple of years that the game keeps getting easier for new players year after year, while it used to be extremely hard for the players who were veterans. And you'll often hear the complaining and comparison from veterans to newbies about, oh, well, when we did it, it was like this, and you don't know what it was like, and this kind of stuff. And that's what's happening now, is that this new revolution is coming about that is making it super easy for solopreneurs, super easy for entrepreneurs, crazy easy for small businesses, even better for every other size too. But the higher you get, the larger you get, the slower the adoption rate. Anyhow, it's spurning new opportunity. So if you were in coding and you were afraid of this stuff, the thing you should really think about is, what was that idea you had about that app that you wanted to do that
Yes.
you said to yourself, if only I could, I would do it better. If only I had the time, I would code this or I would create this or whatever the case it was. That's your job now, right?
Yes.
Like, that's where
Creation.
your money is, right? Like, to me, one of the next things I'm looking forward to doing, when it comes to mind, is a mobile app, right?
Yep.
It's to me, it's like writing a book, right? You can do something that you can put out there. It's passive income. People can download it, use it whenever. You don't necessarily have to live off of it, right? And you make 3-4 apps, and that's a pretty decent amount of passive income, right?
Yeah. And that's like, reminds me of Superhumans, the show I've been doing with George yesterday. Like, we talking about happiness and what you said about, now you can have the job that you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for most people, unfortunately, like you got to work on figuring out what you want uh,
Yeah,
in order to say and even there, I imagine, AI tools could probably help you figure that out,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, look, I was just messing around yesterday, and me and my brother kind of go back and forth on like how useful this stuff is going to be and how much it'll impact his daily life. He's more manual labor, and he's like, I don't think I'm going to see it for a long time. I said, it's possible, but he's also very into cars and modifying cars and stuff. And I said, I don't know if you've ever thought of the idea of taking a picture of something on your car and asking chat like whether or not it can help you make that piece more efficient or help you design a better piece or something to give you greater output if you tell it what the stats of your car are, if it can help you with tuning it with the electronic tuning and all that kind of stuff, right? I imagine a large language model mixed into the electronic tuning kit of a car equals live tuning kit
Oh
24/7,
man.
right? Like that would be a reactionary tuning kit would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it is, to your point, it's a matter of being able to come up with the idea to use the tool to better your life too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
And it's just crazy in that way that I think what I did as an example was, I just asked GPT like, hey, what are some products that currently exist that could be designed way better, but just don't really have the proper design to be the most efficient that they could? And it just came up with like a list of products. And from there, it's like, okay, pick one. Once you've picked one, you can then go get as much data as you can. I'm sure most of these sites related don't protect their data enough, so you could just go scrape their sites for everything possible, put it together in a custom GPT, and now you have all the data of that product from all the competitors, and you're able to ask the GPT, create a unique version of this product that is unlike any of the competitors, that is far more ergonomic, stylish, whatever it is for the end user. I don't know what the output is going to be, but it's probably going to be very, very interesting and worth following up on.
It's just like pick the attribute, right?
Yep.
And just that's really just don't be afraid to, again, just jump in and try this stuff. Just always with I keep talking about this week, like awareness. Just have some awareness of what could be, and kind of the interplay. Again, it's just like you would a human conversation, right? Like you think you're on the same page, but sometimes you get crazy responses, like they didn't hear the right word, or something like that. So it's not. So if we can relate it to more like human conversational activities, and you can approach it that way, it should be a lot less, foreign. But I am looking forward to. I didn't try super hard, but I tried hard one night to create a Final Fantasy based demo data set for HubSpot. And that's when I could not for the life of me get it to give me the data off of a site. Really? It just kept telling me how to do it. And I was like, okay, let's take it back. Like, just give me the names of the characters from the series. And then it was like, all right, here's 10 names. It's like, no, I want 100. Okay, here's 20 names. And so I look forward to that episode where I get the education I need there.
What was it that you were trying to do?
I was trying to create a Final Fantasy universe based HubSpot demo data set with products.
Gotcha.
Right. Okay. And with all the different objects, I gave it a bunch of properties that I cared about, and yeah, it didn't go well.
Okay, you mean like to create like a game that was themed after?
No, like a table. So like all the contacts would be characters from the game.
Got it. Okay. I got it.
Like all the products would be, items like swords and weapons and stuff like that. So we're in 4.0 right now.
Yep.
Right.
So I'm going to say, can you please create dummy data for my CRM where every contact is a character from Final Fantasy and the properties listed in the columns are all related to player statistics, right? And their weapons and weapon mods, spells, etc. Be making properties. They get imported. Don't worry about that stuff. Just make me the data set. Please and thank you.
This was a few months ago. Probably more than a few months ago when I tried this.
Oh man.
So
I think we did this. I want to say that we did this. I did this with Christine Romero. Probably not the. No, yeah, we did this like last year, late last year. It wasn't going to be, or like the output we got then was not going to be as good as the output we get now. But it was really cool that we were just like, yeah, wow, we can use this thing to generate dummy data and we don't even have to come up with it. Sorry, is that what you were looking for, sir? Is that the output that you needed?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Can you please give me...
I did like
to download?
Like I also asked it to like make up contact information, which it did okay. But this is where at that time it was like always a tug of war with like how many results like it would get. Like I remember that when I first got into this, like asking for 2,000 word posts. It would be like 500 and then 700 and then 900, while telling me it's 2,000 words. Those are the good old days. But yeah, and that's where it's like, okay,
so it's like if you gave it more, context, if you gave it more fields, obviously it would create the dummy data for that too. Right. But you can see that it, like, I don't know if it actually went online and did the research. Let's see. Oh, where do I put them? Okay.
And I always wonder, like, if I got it off on the wrong foot by asking it for, like...
Oh, that's cool. So it just took the data that it already knew about the game.
Okay.
And created the table based off of that, which is decent.
Yeah.
If we said, can you please do an online search to gather data for, to gather data related to create dummy data for my CRM, blah, blah, blah. It probably would have done an online search. Whether that would have yielded better data, negligible, I think.
I remember getting really specific with it and said, because I know this data all exists in a Final Fantasy wiki site.
Oh, okay, right? Yeah.
So I was like,
yeah, so you could actually give it the specific URL, right?
And it was like, I'm sorry, I can't do that, but here's how you can do it. And it's like step 6, like here's how you scrape the site. And I was like, I'm pretty sure people have told me you could do this. Like, and I'm trying to get it to explain to me like why it's telling me it can't do it. That's where you're in a bad place when you're trying to have rational conversations with from a place of irrational. We don't have any control over variables and things like that.
So funny.
See, like I can't browse the web directly. Is that a fact?
You gotta give it a little.
Apparently, that's why. Imposter syndrome.
So they have an anti-scraping
thing.
That's why it's basically saying, sorry, I can't scrape it. That's why it's telling you can scrape it, but I don't have that ability, right?
Okay.
Because that's essentially what it's doing when you ask it to go search a site. It's doing a light scrape of the site, right? Of the HTML code, really.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to show and how quick, really, I wanted to show it because of how quick it is. What I was goofing around a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine and was showing him how well Claude can create React environments and the fact that
Oh, wow. Yeah.
it can not only code them for you, but you can preview it so that you can actually like play with it as well. Um, and just the fact that not only can you create it, but you can just continually edit and modify this to your heart's content. So people talk about like, okay, so we have, just some basic marketing dashboard stuff, right? Pretty nicely interactive, kind of cool animations and stuff.
And this is where you get the responses like, oh, this could be better. Like, I don't know about that. And it's like, this just happened in 15 seconds. Like,
Yep.
baby steps at least, but like calm down on the judgment that's happening right now. Like, people that have no idea how to code, have never coded in their life, like can create things like this. Like, it's really quite amazing. So back to the story of like, don't go get a degree in coding. I've been thinking recently because I have a nephew that I play Minecraft with on the weekends, and I know that he has a mind to like build and construct, and he's always. So I was, and there's like coding academies and things like that, or that the kids can, as opposed to like, the sports only extracurricular activities. Um, is that like, should we just look into like a regimen to just hang out with AI tools once in a while?
Yeah, I mean, so it tried to get a little too complicated, basically. And I think I can actually say,
So I guess at that point, probably the only value of that Code Ninjas, I think it's called, is probably the social interaction that he might have while he's there. But
yeah, I mean, I
if
think that like it definitely needs to become. I know Paul Reitzer made a post this past week about how to incorporate AI or like how it's whether or not it's going to get incorporated into classrooms and teaching and education. And it just has to. It
mm-hmm.
just has to. No differently than because this is honestly like I mean, using this stuff is becoming I don't know. I say you have to learn how to use it, but at the same time, the way that the people who are working on it are doing it is meant to be so that it's as easy to use as possible, right? In the long run. So I'm not entirely sure that I should even suggest like, oh, you should, take your time or like learn necessarily like how to do prompting or something. But I can definitely say that for right now to learn how to like do more about your job, it's definitely worth learning how to use this.
Yeah.
So what's cool here is that like okay, even though we can't preview it because it's creating something too complex, right? A lot of people would say at this point like, oh, okay, well it failed because you can't do this, and now you wish you were a coder, right? And it's like no, not really. It's mainly more for like, okay, I need to. Oops.
I mean, this is almost better than the original stuff, like, right? Like, because if you were
Oh yeah.
having to interact with some human being and all the approval processes and like, oh, you got to fix this, uh, not here. And the times where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, here you go. Like, got it. Like, it's like one iteration, two iterations. That took 60 seconds total,
Right.
right? And it's like, match that up against project management activities that your company sucks at because you have no project manager and you're having to use third parties to get stuff done. And it takes a day to get the email back. Like, so at least like, let's compare fairly, right?
Right.
And understand how it works. Like, you might still want to use that human being, you have a good relationship, but at least like, let's compare this correctly based on the time savings. And it's only going to get better. And I think to the school like situation, I mean, hopefully we can just bring it back to like, what's the goal? Like, are we
Right.
preparing our kids, for the real world with this activity? Or are we just like teaching them stuff we want to teach them, right? So I think
Right.
it came up last year, or there was a thread about like, oh, my kid doesn't know how to do handwriting anymore, and like they're not even, or they're teaching it, but and it's like, of course they need to learn handwriting, and I'm like, do they?
Yeah.
like,
Like, when are
like
they actually going to write something again?
right, like
Right.
maybe never. Like that is real possibility, uh, unless like apocalyptic type things and
Right.
we lose all of our screens. But like in reality, like teaching like cursive handwriting, yeah, not required
No,
to
no,
live life
definitely,
anymore.
definitely not. Let's see. So what I'm doing is I'm actually, I don't know that this is going to work this quickly, and of course I always end up when I have to do a demo, it's never
Yeah,
pretty.
no, I get in trouble like this too. It's like, oh, this is
So
gonna work. I just always tie it together with like, see, you need to know what you're doing before you jump into this.
before you
Hope this
actually
was a valuable lesson.
get
Like,
into what it is.
it's not always easy. Now we can talk about troubleshooting, and because we will have to wrap in about 3 minutes. Um, and we're just trying to create an inbound marketing dashboard based on React, right?
Mhm.
And so where is it getting hung up as you try to like take it to the next level?
So what it's unable to do is because the code is a little bit too complex and it requires some dependencies. We're having to put it through Visual Studio so that we can run it. If you know how to use Visual Studio, this is pretty easy. If you don't know how to use Visual Studio, it's pretty easy. um, it's literally just a copy paste into the window, knowing how to save it as a JS file. But again, it'll walk you through all of the steps in order to do it. It's not as if you're going to have to do any of this really. Um, so we've
Yeah.
already created the React project that we're going to use. We're going to install this necessary dependency here.
And like another element, right, of just ease of forward progress, right? Like I got introduced to Notion like just a couple months ago. Like I heard about it obviously, but I never used it before. I
Mm,
get in there, somebody shows me like, oh, I can do this cool stuff. And part of that was like, hey, you can use, mermaid language to build like flowcharts now. And I'm like, watch a video, and then I like work my way through it inside of Notion. And then at the same time, Claude Sonnet comes out. I'm like,
mm,
oh, let me just go see if I can do this over there. I never heard of mermaid language prior to that day, right? Never coded. I have no coding skills at all, right? I can just read words, right? And if they're in the right place and in the right order, I can get the idea. But the fact that I could go from like not having any knowledge at all to
mm.
building uh visual workflows and stuff, like how much like just enables, it makes it accessible, it enables it much faster than ever before. um it's powerful, man.
So yeah, I know we got to wrap, but what I wanted to show is basically that it did run up with an error, and again, where somebody would say like, oh well, see, it didn't work because you run up with an error, and it's like, okay, just copy and paste the error, put it back into Claude, and it'll come back to you with like, oh okay, well here's what you do instead. Here's the modified code in order to fix what it was that was an issue.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, definitely next time can dive more
we'll,
into this and show you
we'll
what it
show
looks like.
the final output, and looks like we've got some planned episodes to build out a company.
Yeah,
um so I look forward to it, man.
yeah, it's gonna
Always a
be
good conversation. And until next time, I mean, we'll just say the same thing at the end of all these. Like, just get in there,
yep.
Just try it. Like there's opportunity everywhere. So find it and let's grow. Have a great
Yes,
weekend,
sir.
everybody.